www.kcbgroup.com/foundation to find out how you can be part of this program too. All right, Lest You Forget this morning is a session that we've been having, talking about some of the things that have been established in the country, and we looked at some things that have been completed. Did you know, lest you forget, that they said we're going to reduce fuel prices, and that is currently going on. By our own admittance this morning, we've seen, fuel has dropped by about 8 shillings, has it not?
Yes,
it has. They also told us that, and this is one, I love it, that they're going to reduce the price of cooking flour, unga. Yeah, that has reduced, no?
Yes, it has.
Yes, it has.
Over, some say up to 100 shillings, yes.
Up to 100 shillings. Yes. So that's something that we can see, and they still say that it is in progress. It will still continue to reduce. Remuneration in terms of service for all officers, that is being looked into, they say, so that's a work in progress. Diaspora issues, we've seen those being sorted out. Judiciary fund, also working. Implementation of the 2/3 gender rule.
Tricky.
Very tricky. This might take 100 years. For as far as I'm concerned, it's been 20 already.
I hold the very controversial opinion that we should scrape that law from our books. Now, not because it is a bad thing. Do not get me wrong. Please don't tweet me and say I'm against gender balance.
You will be tweeted, but yes, say what you're going to say.
What I was going to say is very simple. The way it's structured in our constitution is not implementable without messing with democracy, especially in legislative representation.
Explain, please.
There is no way that you can guarantee that the genders that run for office are going to be 50-50. You cannot say that you are going to say a certain constituency is going to have females and a certain constituency is going to have males. The only way you can do that is if you go the South African system, where you don't vote for an MP, you vote for a party, and the party has to have a party list. So at the end of the day, what is going to be extremely difficult is to find a democratic way of making sure gender balance happens in parliament. Now, in the rest of the places where you're talking about where it's appointments, PSS, CSS, chairmen of boards and board members, it's absolutely doable and it should be done as quickly as possible. But legislatively, it's a very difficult thing to do.
The South African model that you mentioned, surely the members of parliament are elected like any other members of parliament elsewhere.
They're not elected directly. So the South African system is a party system. So what happens if there are 300 MPs, each party lists down 300 MPs before the election, starting in priority. So the first one, second, third.
No, yes, like explain. That. When you list MPs, you mean you decide for the people who's going to represent them?
Yeah. So the people choose which party will represent them. The party chooses who it will take to parliament to represent the people.
Repeat that again.
So the people vote for a party.
Yes.
So when you're going to vote, if it was in Kenya, you vote UDA, you vote Jubilee, you vote ODM. If UDA gets 50%, then 50% of their 300 list go to parliament. What does that guarantee? That you can make sure there is a right mix of youth, right mix of women, and right mix of men. If Jubilee gets 25%, then you get 25 of your 300 members, the top 25%, they go into parliament. That also gives the advantage of party loyalty, because then the party can replace you on that list at any time should you violate the conditions of their party. But in Kenya, where we have a free, direct democracy to choose who you want to represent, you cannot lock a constituency and say this will be for a youth, and then lock another constituency and say this will be for a lady, and then say this will be for someone living with disability. It's not going to work. So we will be stuck here. We will keep having a legislature that is unconstitutional, and we cannot find a way democratically to ensure that it happens. So one of the things that we need to do either is we change how our parliamentary system is done, or face the reality that the way we've structured our democracy, very unpopular opinion,
is not working. Okay, well, definitely one to look at.
And my Twitter handle is at Mike Bichachi.
Affordable finance for MSMEs is another one that is being worked on. Park that. Return Kenya to international football is ongoing. Okay, lest you forget, that was actually a promise that was made. Making assistive devices affordable, and this is again for folks who persons with disabilities. Enforcement of spousal consent in land transactions, and equipping the Attorney General's office. However you want to look at equipping the Attorney General's office, I'm not quite sure, but okay. That is, lest you forget, things that we were told would be done. Now, sadly, even when we look at promises, there will be some that will be kept. There will be some that would, still being worked on. And then, unfortunately, there are some that will be broken. Increased LPO finances to persons with disability, that hasn't happened. Affordable housing mortgages, civil servants and police. I don't know if that's happening.
Let's call it work in progress.
Okay. Free internet and calls. There's free internet in some places. Is there not? And free calls? Okay, it was a promise that was made. It was very clear, and it was said, lest we forget, that we will get to a place whereby you would be able to get onto the internet and not have to pay for it, and also be able to make calls. I call you, CT, in the middle of the day, and I don't have to pay for it. Has not happened.
I'm not sure that's actually a good thing.
That what, we can make free calls?
Yes, and free internet. I'm not so sure that it's a good thing. No.
Okay.
If you're talking about specific places like schools, it makes perfect sense. If you're talking about public spaces, say like a library, it makes perfect sense. If you're talking about it, say like the railway station, again, it makes sense. But then, when we read the story today on page 6 of the Standard, where there's talk about how a database was breached, when you sort of like log into that free Wi-Fi in the public space, do you know who else then has access to you? You think you're the one who has access. Do you know who else within that environment has access? It is fraught with so many issues. The idea and the thinking behind it was to enable Kenyans to be able to be in the 21st century effectively. That's why I said, perhaps if we could be told as to the specific places where this is supposed to happen. Let's say you go to government offices, you'll get free Wi-Fi because you need to transact. That sort of thing, it would make perfect sense. Okay? But free internet throughout the country, that's a tall order.
In fact, it is nearly an impossibility, simply because government does not produce and supply the internet itself. I think that was modified because remember there was a time the president was pushing for ICT centers across different. Actually, it was supposed to be wards. And what needs to happen is young people who are looking for online jobs, etc., should not have to have the internet as a hindrance to them being able to access jobs. So if there was a place that is a kilometer or two away from you where you can go and do your online job, whether it's online writing, research, etc., data entry, then that was supposed to be something that was supposed to be boosted. And I think that is something that is quite doable for the government, and it won't be too expensive. But for everyone, everywhere, all the time, especially given the amount of data that people use, and it varies. So someone is watching a movie, the other one wants to send a WhatsApp message, another one wants to send an email. It would be too bulky.
Do you think that when these promises are made, because now this is where we come to kind of like, rounding out this entire conversation, because lest we forget is where we remind ourselves about certain things and where we are as a nation. When these promises are being made, is it just political euphoria that is felt at that time to say, let me say I can say this because, when I get there, I'll be able to sort it out. But let me tell you something that I know you want to hear, that I know you would be excited about, and that would give me the impetus essentially to vote you in. Why would you say something having not taken into consideration the data and the information that you need to be able to establish that thing when you are making the promise?
Do all that consideration is taken into account. There is the nature of our politics and the nature of politics the world over. And the role that promises play in electioneering. At the time when you say so, there are people who actually told you how it will be done.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not speaking from a blank slate. You have a very clear idea of what it is you want to do. Then there's the reality of what actually happens when you are in power.
Mm-hmm.
There are realities you could not possibly have known of until you're actually sitting on that seat. When that seat of power is now yours, that's when you realize the number of things you need to juggle. Some of these things are not going to work out the way you thought they would.
Yeah. And then, there's one thing also that I think we need to give some leeway to politicians. Sometimes you think you have a good idea until you sit on the driver's seat, and then you find that there's a better idea. And that is also some leeway that we need to give them, because look at Trump. Trump has flip-flopped on this funding thing 3 times in the last 1 week. And I must agree with him that he's found that some of these things are critical, and he is able to change his mind. So it is not a bad thing to change
your mind.
Your mind,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Do remember, when you talk about promises that are made, okay, there is no political leader in this country who has not made some promise
That's
at
true.
one point or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Some have even started it, and their term came to an end before they completed it.
Raila promised us Canaan. We don't even know the directions yet.
How do you spell it exactly?
K-A-N-A-N. The K for Kenya.
You see, the thing about promises is not the promise or the promise in itself. It is the ability to have an honest conversation with your citizens.
Yep.
That honest conversation often means saying, look, I said I was going to do this. This thing is not going to work out the way I thought. What we're going to now do is this. That opportunity is always there. But if you feel that to sort out the problem of a promise that was made involves making another promise, then you've actually lost your way. Because it doesn't work that way. You are compounding a problem that could easily have been resolved. You only need to look at the lives that we live on a daily basis. How many things do we plan that we're going to do? And we even know what we're going to do. And then something turns out. You have a budget and you know the money you're going to get. Then the money comes in and suddenly the math isn't adding up. And it's you and you budgeted. There are realities that we must face, and this can only be faced when you're having an honest conversation.
So part of that honest conversation also means that in the event that you find that things have gone, up in the air, that you can actually come back and say, look, I know that I told you that I was going to do this.
Yes.
But sadly, unfortunately, certain factors then did not allow me to do that.
Yes,
and as a result of that, I'm going to have to, say...
Yes, I actually cannot do this.
Yeah.
I know we said we were going to send capitation. It is proving to be tricky. We are balancing it.
Yes.
So we're not going to send the 15%. Please, we're sending 10 now. Check with the schools. At the end of the day, they'll tell you we've sent 10. Okay? We will tell you on Wednesday next week when we're sending the next. It will be unpalatable. People will make noise, but you have spoken the truth.
And to speak to City's point, number one, if you make a habit of connecting with Kenyans and preparing them psychologically for what is possible or not, they actually will take it better because they're able to adjust in their minds and make plans better. Even the people involved, the headmasters, for example, who are looking for the capitation, will psychologically know, you know what, guess what, this thing will come within 2 months. I need to talk to my suppliers, etc., etc. But number two, there's something that politicians need to, especially those in power, need to stop doing, is you can't run government on campaign mode. Because campaigns are based on promises. When you're in government, you're supposed to do. So I cannot promise my wife I shall send money for lunch. She expects fully that money for lunch will be provided consistently. You see, so there's a difference between dating and marriage. So those in government need to understand we are not dating, we are married.
Yeah, so you actually need to get the thing done.
Yes.
Otherwise, you find yourself sleeping on the couch.
Yes.
Look, I think there are certain things that happen.
Cities, teachers.
I think that
I was imagining the couch.
it's got to be a big couch.
Yeah, when you sit, let me tell you, when I was younger, I used to think sleeping on the couch, so what? But as you grow older and your bones creak and squeak, that couch does not sound palatable at all.
And it can be cold.
Yes.
Look, I think it's good to remind ourselves, however, not necessarily just about the promises that were made, but the reality of situations in which we are in that then need to give you the drive to continually keep folks accountable.
Yes.
And oftentimes, the faces of leadership that we see really are not the worker bees in the hive. The faces of leadership that we see are the ones who need to push those who are working in the hive. But it sometimes doesn't feel good to remind ourselves, if you never die a situation, we know the adage that we even now make fun about. In 6 months' time, in 12 months' time, at the end of 1 year, certain things would have been done. Oh, how wonderful it would be if actually in 6 months' time, some of those things were actually done. You know, if we look at, for example, take something like the Chan, the Cup of Nations, that was supposed to actually be on right now. It was moved to August. It hasn't happened.
Because
They said one country was not ready with its facilities to then be able to run the circuit of the tournament. Now, it's up to you to decide which country that was. But, the organizers said one country was not able to meet the deadline. And so because of that, it has been moved to August. Yes, we've seen that sporting activities have been moved. I mean, the entire Olympics was moved because of COVID. Things like that have happened. But remember that we had been told that Stadia would be ready in 6 months' time 2 years ago.
Do the story of Stadia.
I'm just giving an example. So you can imagine if Water Stadium, for example, where I keep forgetting what that chart is called, that thing where they put engineer and whatever, if that thing was not buried in a heap of rubbish and the whole thing was actually done. Can you imagine if every county had one, sports complex that was ready, finished, and then you would not have this business of saying, well, let's move an Africa-wide tournament. Let's now not have to move
What about the 100 dams?
Sorry?
The 100 dams that we're supposed to build?
Huh?
Okay. Yeah.
Dam.
Okay.
D-A-M, not D-U-M-B.
Okay.
Oh.
Or D-A-M-N. Yes.
Damn. Look.
Yeah. Damn.
Yeah. So, I mean, here we are saying that those things. What would happen? Imagine what would happen if you had them completed.
But where Junction is, there is a stadium being built, right? I think the speed is quite high. So that's one thing that we can count towards the...
Junction.
Where Junction Mall is, across the road from it, there's a whole green Mabati thing and they're building the stadium there.
Stadium? Stadium?
Yes.
Okay. They're building it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I see the trucks moving in.
How do you know it's a stadium?
Well, because there used to be a small football pitch there and they're extending it.
You sure?
Yeah, well, that's a vast around. That's what I was told.
The one it's near the Met.
Yeah.
And it's near former Kenya Science Teachers Training College.
the one and only, yes.
And so you think that because there's a green thing, they're building a
Well, I have been told it is.
The people you talk to, Chief. Okay. We'll go with the flow.
Guys, it's just important for us to continue, and I think we'll be doing this regularly because, lest we forget, is a time where you're able to reflect and say that there are certain things which actually should happen. Yes, there are promises that were made. Some of those have been delivered. Some of them have not been. But there are situations in the country that even when we forget about them and think, okay, well, let's go into full-blown campaign mode, we need to remember that those situations still exist. 31st of January has come and gone. It will be interesting to see what happens this week with capitation. It will also be interesting to see what happens with the health system to make sure that it's delivering healthcare to Kenyans. Lest we forget, there are many things that happen for which you need to sit up and take responsibility, but also hold leaders accountable. It happens, lest we forget. Good morning. It's 7 a.m.